Yeah, thank you very much to Marcus for the welcome. I'm Ruth Robinson. I'm the managing director in Full Circle, and we deliver the Acumen programme for InterTrade Ireland. And most of the work that we do in Full Circle is based on helping micro and small businesses to grow. And a large part of that involves helping them to grow by looking at export markets. And as our closest export market is the Republic of Ireland, a lot of our time is spent helping Northern Ireland SMEs to trade with the Republic of Ireland, and vice versa. We work with Republic of Ireland micro enterprises and SMEs to help them to export to the north as well. So we're very well experienced when it comes to this kind of work. In terms of the webinar today, as Marcus said, just to let you know, it is being recorded, and it would be great to get some questions from you. So you'll see shortly that I'm going to be talking about sort of different sections within the webinar, and it'd be great if there's any questions at any point, just put them in the chat function. Marcus is going to keep an eye on that, and he'll ask me those questions as we go through. So rather than keep questions to the end, please feel free just to put them in as we go, and Marcus will ask me. A copy of the recording will be shared with you post-session, as will a copy of the slides. So don't worry too much about taking notes. Do if it suits you, but you will be sent a copy of the slides. Okay, so in terms of what we're going to cover, sorry, just to give you a bit of a sense of timelines as well, I'll be talking for about an hour. And then there'll be questions as well. So depending on how many questions, the session will either be an hour or up to an hour and a half. It just depends on questions. Okay, so what are we going to talk about today? So our agenda is, sorry, I can just hear there's somebody not on mute there. I can hear a little bit of feedback. If you don't mind just making sure you're on mute, that would be great. So today's agenda, we're going to cover first of all, why should you consider selling into Ireland? So we're going to talk a little bit about the context and the opportunities that exist in the market. The second point on the agenda then is assessing your readiness to sell into Ireland. So taking a look internally at your business and thinking about assessing your readiness to sell in the Irish market. We're then going to look at how do you research the market and find potential customers in Ireland. We're going to look at selling to Irish customers. And we're going to look briefly at public sector opportunities in Ireland. So it may be that for your business, it's not about selling to private customers, but it's actually to the Irish government or to other public sector organisations. So we're going to talk a little bit about that as well. And then how to retain your Irish customers. And then finally, Marcus will speak at the end, and that's really to give you a sense of the InterTrade Ireland supports that are out there and the contacts that you can speak to about those various supports. Okay, so hopefully there's nothing there that's too shocking or surprising. Okay, so why sell into Ireland? Context and opportunities. And the first one is this nifty little infographic that comes from the Central Statistics Office in the Republic of Ireland. So they had a census in 2022, and this tells us quite a bit about the country as it was in 2022. So the population in 2022 was 5.149 million. Nearly said billion there, but no, definitely just million. So that's the highest population in Ireland since the famine times. So it's amazing how so in the Republic of Ireland, obviously, if you add in the north too, the overall population is getting much closer to where it was, pre-famine times. So real population growth up 8% since the last census. The average age of the population is 38.8. And in terms of citizenship, non-Irish citizens now number 12% of the population, 631,785. And dual Irish citizens, i.e. Irish citizens who have an Irish passport plus another passport, number 170,597, so 3%. In terms then of religion, 69% of people in the Republic of Ireland are Roman Catholic, 3.515 million. But 14% now declare themselves as having no religion. So that is up 14%. Some of those summary stats again then. So for the first time in 171 years, Ireland's population has exceeded the 5 million threshold. There were 139,000 people in the state on April the 3rd, 2022, an 8% increase since the last census, which was in 2016. The average age of the population has increased from 37.4 to 38.8 in 2022. And there's the numbers of dual citizenship as well. There was a drop in health from 87% to 83% in the proportion of people who reported that their health was good or very good. An interesting little fact as well around demographics there. Approximately a third of workers worked from home or at least some part of their week. So that would have been, as you can imagine, a huge change since the 2016 census, and obviously very COVID related. We had the same in the north as well. The proportion of the population who identified as Roman Catholic as their religion has fallen from 79% in 2016 to 69% in 2022. So quite a significant drop in a short time frame. Other funny little facts that they've sprinkled in here. More than 70,000 people indicated that they undertook voluntary work. 300,000 volunteered in a sporting organisation. And you would kind of know that actually if you're ever in the south, and it's probably very similar in the north. All the kind of youth sports clubs, the GAA clubs, etc., volunteer run. Almost 80% of households had a broadband internet connection, up from 71% in 2016. So some interesting little facts from the Irish census. Just a little bit of comparison then between Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland. So the population in Northern Ireland in around the same time frame, the census didn't exactly line up, 1.9 million. In Northern Ireland, which is the highest ever, 5.1 million in the Republic of Ireland, highest ever. But don't forget that pre-famine times, the island had a population that was over 8 million. Growth in population in Northern Ireland, that growth is really coming from natural birth, whereas there's a lot more migration into Ireland. It's an ageing population. In 6 years in Northern Ireland, it's projected that there will be a lot more older people than children, and we have a growing ageing population in the Republic of Ireland as well. So that's very similar. In terms of net migration then, the figures there really reflect a little bit of a COVID impact. You'll see there in the figures. Okay, so looking a little bit then at Ireland's economy and Ireland's trade. So what is the Republic of Ireland like as a kind of a trading nation, if you like? And you can see there where Ireland exports its goods to and where it imports its goods from. So the UK remains a very, very important export market for Irish goods. You can see there 22.2 billion. And the country is also importing 29.4 billion. And that figure is all even post-Brexit. So that trading relationship between Ireland and the UK as a whole is very important. And then we have figures separately that look at what Northern Ireland is importing into the Republic of Ireland and importing from the Republic of Ireland as well. The US then, Ireland exports 63.1 billion of goods to the US. This is only goods, by the way, not services. The EU 80.5 billion, the rest of the world 42.7 billion. So in 2022, there was 208 billion of goods exports from the Republic of Ireland. In terms of imports, then I talked about the UK figure, the US 22.3 billion, the EU 42.6 billion, the rest of the world 46.6 billion. So importing 141 billion of goods. You'll see there that the trade there. So exports to the UK, 17.4 billion of that went to Britain, and 5 billion of that went to Northern Ireland. And then from the UK, 24.0 billion of that came from Britain, and 5.4 billion of that came from Northern Ireland. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that cross-border trade in a minute. In terms then of what is being exported there, you'll see they've identified a couple of little things for the infographic. So mineral fuels exporting 1.8 billion and importing 13.1 billion. You can see there how important the pharmaceutical industry. If you ever travel in the south or visit, you will notice the number of enormous pharmaceutical buildings. So you can see they're exporting 134 billion of chemicals and pharma, and really is that massive pharma trade in the Republic of Ireland, but also importing 38.1 of chemicals and pharmaceuticals. Machinery and transport equipment then exporting 28.3 billion of that and importing 52.4 billion of that. You've got, large organizations like Moffat's, for example, within that sector, but also importing a lot from the Northern Ireland kind of OEM sector as well. Okay, so a little bit about Northern Ireland trade then, and this graphic is slightly older. This is a 2021, 2022 graphic, but you can see there when it comes to export, Ireland is, so within this, Britain counts as an external market as opposed to an export market. So the number one trading partner for Northern Ireland is Britain, but that won't be included in this as that is an external market as opposed to an export market. But in terms of export, then Ireland, as you can see from the graphic, is the biggest partner country for exporting. Now, as I say, this figure is older. The number of goods has hugely increased since 21-22, but the share of that is still highly important. So you can see there, Ireland is number one. US is number 2, Netherlands is number 3, Canada is number 4, and Germany as number 5. And in terms of where we're importing goods from, and again, not including Britain, Ireland, China, the US, Netherlands, and Germany. Top 5 commodities then that Northern Ireland is exporting: machinery, specific for particular industries. I don't think that'll be a huge surprise, again, when you consider the enormous manufacturing sector here in Mid-Ulster. Dairy products and birds' eggs. So again, our whole agri sector, massively important in terms of export. Medical and pharmaceutical products. So if you think of, Norbrook there, or Almac. Other transport equipment, Bombardier, Shorts, etc., other transport equipment, and then general industrial machinery. Again, so you're probably aware those big kind of important export commodities, but obviously there's a heck of a lot more that is being exported from Northern Ireland. But those are the big ticket items that you will often hear about. Okay, so a little stat then on cross-border trade, and this is taken from the InterTradeIreland website, and there is a lot of reports on the InterTradeIreland website. If this is something that you want to have a look at and you want to understand more about, do look up the stats. They are available through the website. But this little graph is looking at north-south trade, south-north trade, and cross-border trade in general over this kind of 11-year period from 2021 to 2022. And you can see that it is this kind of positive upward trajectory. A few stumbles here and there, notably around 2020 with COVID, and around kind of 2014, 2015, it dropped as well. But really since then, there has been this really positive upward trajectory, and particularly since 2020 onwards. And if the graph continued into 23 and 24, again, you would see this, this huge increase in trade. at a cross-border level. So if you look there at the stats then, north to south trade, this is goods and services. You have 6.353 billion, going north to south, and you've got 3.531 billion going from south to north. So cross-border trade now approaching 10 billion in 2022. And again, that has continued since then. We just don't have the stats yet. There's always a lag when it comes to the Central Statistics Office, which is the Southern Statistics Board, and NISRA, which is the Northern Irish one. So we don't have our figures yet fully done for 2024. Okay, so what is Northern Ireland selling to the Republic of Ireland in terms of goods? And here's some figures. So food and live animals, 1.2 billion or 33%. Unsurprisingly, I suppose anybody who's had any involvement in agriculture will absolutely know the importance of the Irish market to Northern Ireland farmers. So you'll see there dairy products and birds' eggs. Sorry, there's some feedback there. Don't know if somebody needs to be put on mute there, Marcus. Maybe you can see.
And just double check here, but if you carry on anyway there, Ruth.
Okay. Okay, so food and live animals say 1.2 billion, 40% there dairy products and birds' eggs, 33% meat and meat preparations, and you've got cereals and cereal preparations there as well. Then manufactured goods classified by material. So I always laugh at these kind of descriptions, but you're talking about goods that have been manufactured from metal, and then other manufactured items is 15%, and at 14% then machinery and transport equipment. So as I said, this big kind of Middlester manufacturing sector is really important when it comes to this. So this is all being sold really well in the Republic of Ireland. So road vehicles, particular machinery specialised for certain industries, general industrial machinery and equipment. And as I say, just take a drive around Cull Island and you'll probably see much of this is coming from there. So that's the kind of top three. And then a little bit more broadly, this is the top 10, and apologies that that's quite faded as a graphic. So again, 3.7 billion of goods were exported from Northern Ireland to the Republic of Ireland in 2022. That's just goods. The top 10 products then accounted for 54% of all exported goods to Ireland in 2022. So you can see the classifications there. So you've your dairy products and birds' eggs, petrol, petroleum products related materials, beverages, road vehicles, meat and meat preparations, machinery, cereals and cereal preparations, feeding stuff for animals, so animal feeds, miscellaneous manufactured articles, and manufacturers of metal. So again, sometimes that doesn't really tell us a lot because those classifications sound a bit odd, but it gives you a bit of a sense of what is actually being sold to the Republic of Ireland in terms of goods. I thought this was a little bit interesting because it shows you where there is a surplus or a deficit in terms of import-export between Northern Ireland and Ireland. So if you look at if you look through the table there, you'll see that when it comes to food and live animals, there is more going from Northern Ireland to the Republic than is reverse. In fact, it's you'll see there it's 1.243 billion going from Northern Ireland to the Republic, and it's 1.181 billion going the other way around. There's a similarly in beverages and tobacco, there's 200 million going to the south, there's 86 coming north. Things like crude materials are very similar. Animal and vegetable fats, etc. There's more going north to south. But a massively other way in terms of chemicals and related products. And again, we talked about that big farm industry. So there's 750 million coming south to north, 319 million going north to south in terms of that. So just thought it's an interesting stat or an interesting graphic. It gives you a little bit of a sense of, the balance of different items going north to south. And a stat really is, again, to give you a little bit of a sense of the economy in Ireland. So this is if you listen to various podcasts or you're kind of interested in economics, you may know that the Irish budget has run a surplus for the last couple of years. You'll see there the surplus has increased. So there was in 2022 there was 8.6 billion. In 2023 there was 7.5 billion, but the increase is expected in 2024. It's going to be closer to 25 billion. Of a budget surplus in 2024, and part of that is due to a 14 billion windfall from Apple. So again, if you follow sort of economics and news, you will maybe have heard about that it was a tax system that had been the Irish tax system obviously is favourable for corporates, but there was like an extra thing that Apple was getting. It's found to be unfair, and Apple have paid kind of 14 billion to the Irish government. So this huge budget surplus in Ireland. In contrast, then the UK budget, obviously Northern Ireland budget is really from Westminster. UK budget has a deficit in 2023-24 of about 120 billion. So the economic outlook isn't really the same, and that is another reason why the Irish market is potentially interesting for Northern Ireland businesses, because the economics is a bit brighter currently in the Republic of Ireland than it is in the UK as a whole. All right. So in summary then, why might you, as a Northern Irish business, want to sell into the Irish market? So looking at the census, looking at those stats, you've got a market that is potentially 3 times the size of the Northern Ireland market, and it's right on your doorstep. Northern Ireland businesses are already successfully winning contracts in Ireland, i.e. not NI. And there's been a real rise in trade. You'll see that from the stats, an incredible rise in trade since Brexit. And that is as both Northern Ireland businesses and Irish businesses have looked to do more trade on the island, rather than necessarily having to buy goods from Britain. So huge increase in trade since Brexit. There are no trade barriers to exporting to the market, which is important. There's a buoyancy in the economic landscape in Ireland, as you can see from that budget surplus stat. And then this isn't in my presentation so far, but it's a point that we hear time and time again from Northern Ireland companies. The prices and the costs of goods are generally higher in Ireland. As a result, businesses from Northern Ireland often get paid more for what they're selling in the Republic of Ireland, and therefore the sale is potentially more profitable. And that is true of many of the industries that we're dealing with, from consumer goods to professional services to construction, etc. There is an expectation that things cost more in the south, and therefore you could potentially get paid more by operating in the market. And there are huge opportunities in the growth markets as well. So services is hugely important in the Irish economy, pharma, manufacturing. There's a huge emphasis on construction at the moment. As you'll know, Ireland has a housing crisis. And as a result, there are all these opportunities for Northern Irish businesses. There is also a lot of difficulty in terms of retaining skills, as we experience in the north as well, but it's even more acute in the south. So a lot of businesses in the south face real challenges with recruitment, and therefore some businesses find it harder to grow there. So again, huge opportunities to fill that gap if you're a Northern Ireland business looking to grow into the south. Okay. So we've talked about why you might like to sell in the Irish market. Marcus, is there any questions on that, or shall I move on to the next section?
No, I think we're okay to move on to the next session. But as I say, just if anyone has any questions, please add them into the chat, and we'll try our best to get through as many as possible throughout the webinar.
Perfect, thank you. Okay, so our next point then is assessing your readiness to sell in the Irish market. Okay, so how do you know if your business is ready to sell in the Irish market? And effectively, we're talking here about some key building blocks. So we're going to talk about market knowledge, product, service, processes, attitude, finance, and capacity. And we're just briefly going to touch on these. So if we're starting with product or service, I guess the fundamental question that we're answering here is, why should a customer in Ireland decide to buy your product or service instead of buying a competitor one that may be more local to them. And ultimately, your success in the Irish market, or indeed in any export market, will depend on your ability to provide a compelling answer to that question. So if there is a business down the road that makes the same widget that you make, why should they buy from you? There needs to be a really compelling reason why. So how is your product or service unique or different? How is it better than what's in the market? And can you articulate that in a compelling way? And I suppose one thing we find with businesses is no matter how many times we talk about this, there's still this, oh, we're really good value for money, or we have great customer service. That's a baseline now. People expect value for money. They expect good customer service. Don't always receive it, I would say. But those are expectations. So they're not USPs. So what is the really compelling reasons why you're different and why it matters? And say if it is on customer service, then articulate exactly what you mean by that. Why is your customer service absolutely peerless? Why is it better than what anybody else is doing? What do you mean by value for money, if that's what it's about? What does that mean? The terms value for money, good customer service, they don't mean anything anymore. You need to have really compelling, unique selling points. And they need to be articulated clearly. So that is, in terms of your product or service, are you ready to sell that product or service in the market? Do you know why it's special? And why should those customers in that market buy what you do rather than what someone else does? Attitude then, and I can't emphasize enough the importance of this. If you want to set up to sell in the Irish market or in any export market, you need to have established some commitment to it. So are you personally committed to export growth? Is your team committed to export growth? And do you have the perseverance to achieve your goals? And are you prepared to get out of your comfort zone? So I suppose in some ways in Northern Ireland, we're a small market. You might well have a business where you haven't really had to do a huge amount of selling. People know the name, you have a reputation, you get referrals, maybe you've had a lot of inbound sales. But if you want to grow in the Irish market, potentially you won't have that brand recognition. People won't know who you are. You won't have that level of referrals coming in all the time. So you need to be prepared to get out of your comfort zone to really achieve growth. How will you ensure that you won't give up when the going gets tough? So this is about attitude. It's about establishing commitment. It's about knowing why you want to export, and then having a real reason why, and that being enough to kind of keep you going when times get tough. And then market knowledge, and we'll talk about this a little bit later as well when we talk about market research and find out more about your customers as well. But what do you know about the Irish market? Are you aware of market trends and contextual issues? Do you understand what's happening in the sector that you operate in? Do you know who the competitors are in that market? What do you know about your customers, their needs and buying habits? And again, we're going to talk about this more through the presentation. But as a kind of an overview slide, that's what we're talking about with market knowledge. And when it comes to competitors, I really love this little table, and I would use this in a lot of presentations and workshops, because when we say, what do you know about your competitors, what's your competitive advantage, etc., how does your product service compare to theirs? This is a brilliant way. This little Venn diagram is a brilliant way to really analyze this. So we're looking at here in this market, what do your competitors offer? Who are they? What do they offer? What do you offer? And what does your customer in that market need? And if you look at this, in the areas that the customer wants it, you offer it, and the competitor offers it, you're in the world of commodity there. I don't know if you can see the font very clearly in the center, but that is a commodity item. And what happens with commodity items, as you well know, is that the price gets lower and lower because it is a commodity item. There is nothing special about what that is. Everybody offers it, everybody needs it, and the impact on the price gets severe. So it's a commodity item. Then you've got areas where you're doing something and your customer needs it, but your competitor effectively does it better than you. So maybe they have part of an offer that you just simply can't match, or they have greater coverage in terms of service in that market, and you can't match that. That's where they have their edge. Their competitor edge comes from what the customer needs, what your competitor's doing really well, and what you're not doing really well. That's the competitor's edge. Now, you could try and steal that edge, but that is more difficult. But what you're really trying to find is, what does your customer need? What do you offer? What do you do really, really well that your competitor doesn't do really well? And that is your machete edge. That's your real unique competitive advantage. The customer wants it, you do it brilliantly. Your competitor either doesn't do it or they don't do it well. That's where you have the advantage. That's where you have a competitive edge. And that's really what you're trying to find in the Irish market. And then we've got this, if you look at the rest of what the customer needs, you've got this whole area of unmet customer needs. So the customers might need a whole lot of things that neither you nor your competitor has properly identified yet. There's potential there for you. And then there's this whole area of non-value offerings, and this will happen. Stuff you do, the customer in the south isn't looking for it. Stuff your competitor offers as well, that customer isn't looking for it. Those are non-value offerings, and sometimes it's difficult to determine if something is a non-value offering or a machete edge. And the key thing is, does the customer need it? Is the customer looking for it? Don't get distracted in terms of these non-value offerings. Okay. So how well do you know your competitors? How well do you know how your products or services compare to them? And do you know your true USP in that export market in relation to your competitors? And really what we're doing here is we're defining that machete edge. So that's competitors. And then the customers. And I suppose there's two levels really of understanding customers in the market. Again, we will talk about this as we go through. At the very basic level, what are the types of customers that you have in the north? And will that be the same in the south? So marketing segmentation, basic types. So if we're talking about a business to business world here, that might be industry sector, that might be size of company, that might be maturity of company. So say, for example, you sell into HR companies for sake of argument, and they tend to be mid-sized. That will be kind of basic B2B marketing segmentation. You could, in theory, target HR organizations of a certain size, say 10 employees, 20, that kind of thing. Level 2 then, in terms of market knowledge, when you really get to know your target customer, you may have done something called customer personas or customer avatars. This is where you absolutely know your target customer in the north, and you know who you're going to be targeting in the south. You'll be able to define their job title, their goals, motivations and frustrations, objections, their role in the buying process, etc. Excuse me, I'm just going to get a drink. So, yeah, defining your customers in the Irish market, and then defining how you're going to sell your product to your customers in the Irish market. So, are you going to sell directly to them? Will you sell indirectly via a distributor? Will you use a sales agent or an introducer? And then how are you going to make it fast, easy, and convenient for your customers to buy from you? And really here, what we're talking about is, how are you going to remove barriers? So think about currency. Say, for example, you've got a food product. You want to target delis, small food businesses in Ireland. Great guns. You decide you're going to do it directly. You know who the customers are, etc. You go to sell to them and then they say, yeah, what's that? What does that cost in euro? And either you haven't converted it or you haven't worked out how you're going to get paid in euro. That's a barrier. So think about currency, think about payment methods, think about how you're going to get it to them. Does your courier operate in the Irish market as well? Do you need to consider a different delivery method? Are you going to deliver it yourself? How are you going to follow up with them and service and support them in the market? So at a basic level, thinking about processes for market entry. So that is all around processes. And then finance, what will the impact of this growth, export growth in the Republic of Ireland be on your finances and cash flow? The most important thing here really is to think about your profit margins. So say you've always sold locally in the north and now you're going to be selling in the south. Potentially your delivery costs are going to be higher. Potentially you've got a currency, you've got costs related to currency in there. Potentially you might need to look at a distributor. There are lots of things that might impact on your profit margins by looking at this market. So are they sustainable, or do you need to look at your pricing in the market, or your pricing in the north as well? But are your profit margins sustainable? Will you have upfront expenses to cover before you make more money? So things like salary, if you're going to employ somebody in the market, looking at transport costs, looking at stock costs, looking at marketing, looking at storage, looking at wastage, all of those costs you may have before you make more money, generated from the Irish market. And we will talk about the InterTrade Ireland supports, but one of the big benefits of something like Trade Export Pathway is it's allowing you to toe dip, to start to find out more about the market, to answer some of these questions that we're talking about. But in terms of this finance, the research aspect of Trade Export Pathway up until your second implement is completely funded. So effectively, you're getting all this support, all this time is being done by somebody else, and you're effectively getting it for free. So it's an amazing opportunity for the business. What do you need to get in place as well in terms of finance with your bank or other provider? So if you're going to sell into the south, do you need to look at an overdraft? If you're going to target, a big buyers like a supermarket, for example, and they've got funny invoicing, do you need to have an invoice financing facility to cover you, whilst they take their credit terms? Do you need a loan? Do you need a grant? Do you need investors, etc.? Things to consider when it comes to starting to sell in the Irish market. And finally, in this section then, capacity. So if you win more work, can you service the increased demand? Will you need a physically bigger premises? Will you need to take on new staff? Will you need to invest in equipment and tools? And if you like, these are all the nice problems to have, but it is something to consider. So say you've got used to doing work that is kind of highly specialized, and you're used to personally doing that. It may be that as you grow and you win more work in this market, it's not going to be possible for you to do that. Will you be able to take on new staff? Will you be able to invest in the equipment and tools needed in order to deal with an increase in demand for your product or service? So all things to consider when it comes to assessing your readiness to sell in the Irish market. Okay, so researching the market and finding customers. Marcus, I'm assuming no questions?
Just a couple
Yeah.
of questions.
Okay.
I'll cover them now. Sure. The
Yep,
first
go
one
ahead.
is there much distinction between selling products and selling services?
In terms of the Irish market, or
I suppose, yeah, just in terms of the Irish market.
is there much distinction? Yeah, so, well, I mean, I guess I don't fully understand the question, but in terms of what you need to prepare, or I don't know, maybe the person who's asked that question, if you give me another kind of line or two of context, I might be able to answer it better for you. Is there another question? And I'll come
Yeah,
back to
that's
that
no
one.
problem. Just another question again. Are there any particularly useful online platforms that can be used for selling from NI to Ireland?
Any particular online platforms? Well, there'll be some industry specific ones. You've also got, depending on your selling, if you're selling into retail, the platform Faire, Faire, is a very useful platform for kind of any wholesale. Works well in export markets because it deals with different currencies as well. It makes it very easy. The rest are probably more industry specific. Obviously, you've got, your normal kind of social media shops and that kind of thing. If you're kind of a direct to consumer product, you'll be able to use your own website as well. It really, depends on the industry that you're in.
Okay, well, thank you very much. I think that's most of the questions for now. And as I
Okay.
say, everyone, please keep adding the questions into the chat. And
Yeah.
and we'll
And
try our best to answer them.
Yeah, perfect. And in terms of that product service question, if I can get a wee line of context, I'll probably be able to answer it better. A product, I guess, we're talking a physical product, a service. We're generally talking about, professional services, something that you're delivering, whether that's even waste management services or, legal services, accounting services, consultancy services, HR services, IT services, etc. But if you give me a bit more context, I'll answer it more robustly for you. Okay. We've looked at some of the key building blocks of preparing to sell in the Irish market, but how do you go about actually doing that research? So, let's look at some of the detail. So where do you start? And in a lot of cases, it is simply desk-based online research. It doesn't have to get super, super fancy. There is a basic way to do this, which is just get on the internet, get Googling, look at websites, look at LinkedIn, go through your personal contacts of your staff. What do they know so far? What can they tell you? What else might you need to find out? If you want to get sort of macro level information about the market, you can look at the Central Statistics Office. So those little infographics and stuff that I had at the start, they all come from the Central Statistics Office. They have a whole ream of things in relation to trade and the economy. And actually, it's a really good place to start if you want to understand a little bit more about the market. The Invest NI Business Information Centre has reports available as well. So if you want to look at, the Irish market for X, you'll be able to get databases, you'll be able to get market reports. If they have it in Invest NI, you will be able to access it. So, just Google the Invest NI Business Information Centre if you want to start to get a little bit more knowledge. What I would say though, on the databases that are given, that is just the first part. You can't rely on all that information and you need to do a fair bit of your own research on top, but it can be a good starting point. NI Business Info, a great website, has information available on Irish exporting. If you want to know again at that macro level, what's happening in the Irish government, what are they talking about? The National Development Plan 2021 to 2030 is pretty important. I won't say it's the most exciting read, if I'm honest. It's really very long, but they do some nice little summaries here and there. But it shows you what the state intends to invest in during this kind of 9-year period. We're already 3 years into it. So have a good read of that if you're looking at, say, particularly if you're, in the construction sector or you're interested in selling into the public sector as well. Where's the investment likely? Check that out. Then your industry specific research. So for example, any clients of mine that I have that deal in construction related services or construction related products are very aware of CIS, Construction Information Service. Really, really important in terms of industry, in terms of what's happening in that market. Also just get boots on the ground, get out there, get looking, get seeing what's happening. And then use supports available from InterTrade Ireland. So for example, I mentioned the trade export pathway already. So you can get some of this market research done through the trade export pathway. So if you've done a little bit of research and really now you're struggling to get the time to find out more about the market, look up the trade export pathway. If you're eligible, it's potentially an amazing resource for you. Sources of prospects then as well. So in terms of finding these customers in the Irish market, where might you get them? Trade journals, we talked about online research, business publications, customers advertising, government publications, market research services, press articles, professional bodies, LinkedIn, trade associations, attending networking events, trade show exhibiting or attendance, searching on Google. There are numerous ways that you can source the prospects for your business in the Irish market. But when you build a real prospect list, how do you do that? How do you go about building a real prospect list in Ireland? So take what you know to build out a list of people in your target companies for sales prospecting. This is a directory of real people who will benefit from your product or service. So say, for example, you want to target large organizations in and around Dublin. Say you have maybe a product that is useful for staff in there. You might target up to 5 people in that organization. So you might want to target somebody at the top of the organization. You might want to target somebody in procurement. You might like to target somebody in marketing. You might like to target somebody in operations. Different job roles. So it's not just one contact per target company. It's potentially up to 5 people in that organization that you can target, because you don't know exactly how that organization works. But if you identify that this company may be in need of your product, then you can look at having potentially up to 5 people that you target in that one organization. Once you have your list, keep track of your leads and how you find them using a sales CRM. That can be as simple as, so a CRM being customer relationship management tool, that can be as basic as an Excel document, or as complicated as a fully fledged CRM. And we'll talk about that a little bit later as well. In terms of understanding your target customers in Ireland, so we mentioned this briefly when it came to market knowledge, but you need to really get to know them as much as possible. Get to know these customers in the Irish market. Build out that ideal customer profile, like we talked about, a persona, an avatar, whatever you want to call it. And then get into the detail, understand what their objections and perceived risks might be. Why might they object to buying from you as a Northern Irish company? What risks might they see in doing business with a company that they don't know? How are you going to understand those and therefore prepare an answer? Once you know the type of company you want to target, it's time to get in their head, hang out where they hang out. Are they on social media? What's their network of choice? Are they members of Facebook or LinkedIn groups? Are they responsive can you become responsive to their social media presence? So if you really want to start to do business with a company and they're on social media a lot, can you start to engage with them on it? Comment on their LinkedIn, comment on their Facebook, whatever it is, start to build a bit of a conversation. Are they in the news? What events are they likely to be at, etc. So really starting to target that type of company hanging out where they're hanging out. And how does a potential cross-border customer, now that you have them, how do they become your customer? How do they move from a prospect to a loyal customer? So some questions to understand then in the first instance, what do you want our product to do for you? What features are important to you and why? What's your budget? How are you currently solving this problem? It's the kind of questions you want to get to answer from your target customer. Looking backwards, when was the last time you bought something similar to our products or services? Was that a good or bad experience? Why did you make that decision? How did you evaluate different offers? What are the deciding factors that made you choose a particular solution? What needs to happen to make you a customer? So that's starting to understand when you get engaging with the target customers, these are things that you want to understand about them. And then your value proposition. What sets you apart from competitors in that cross-border market? So we talked about the machete edge when it came to market knowledge. Why do customers consider this? And think about it in the home market first of all. Why do customers buy from us in the home market? Why do they buy from our competitors or not us? Why do some potential customers not buy at all? What do we need to do to be successful in the future and bring that knowledge to the Irish market as well? And when it comes then to your competitive advantage, focus on what your product can do for your customers. So a strong competitive advantage reflects the competitive strength of your business. It's unique, cost effective, or delivers more. It's clear and simple. It may need to change over time. If you think about that machete edge, something you offer that your competitor doesn't, that your customer needs, it doesn't take long for your competitor to realize and swoop in and steal your idea, and then it becomes a commodity item again. So you're constantly evolving, you're constantly keeping a step ahead of what other people are doing. And that competitive advantage, it must be supported by ongoing market research as trends change. Another thing just to consider when it comes to identifying customers, targeting customers, researching the market, is think about partnerships as well. So can you identify potential customers that reach the same cross-border customers as you? So these can become helpful strategic partners or complementary service providers. So there may be somebody who provides a similar service to customers in that market. They could be a Northern Ireland business, or they could be a business that exists in the south. Say, for example, as management consultants, we may engage with accountants, say, in the Irish market, because they're dealing with the same type of micro enterprises or SMEs that we might deal with, and potentially there's some kind of strategic partnership there where we can become complementary service providers. So think about how that might be relevant for you. You can build, these partnerships through, writing for their publications or giving speeches, providing resources for their websites, joining a network or mastermind group where you share contacts. It's about providing value to complementary businesses and fostering a culture of growing together, onward referrals, etc. How do you partner with them for mutual benefit? Okay. Marcus, any other questions before we move on to selling to Irish customers?
Yes, just a couple of questions here. So the first one is is from an architectural firm, although this could probably apply to all industries. Are we better to target the border counties and say Dublin first due to travel distances, or is there another part of Ireland that perhaps we should target first of all?
Yeah, okay. So I suppose the thing to think about here is a couple of elements. So one is logistics, and you're absolutely right. If you win your first customer in Ireland and they happen to be in West Cork, you've got 5+ hours travel time if you want to go down and see them. That naturally presents a challenge. The other thing is we've got this really, really strong, you'll have heard of the Dublin-Belfast Economic Corridor, DBEC. There's an organisation actually devoted to that. It is this area of a lot of commerce and industry. So in and around Dublin and up that economic corridor towards Belfast is a huge amount of opportunity and a huge amount of investment. So there are a lot of opportunities there that's within a 2-hour drive of most of Northern Ireland. So I think it's about identifying, is there an opportunity close to home? Now, the border counties, the easiest thing about that is they're very, very used to. So customers along the border counties are extremely used to buying north and south. So if you deal with customers in Cavan, if you deal with customers in Monaghan, in Donegal, they're absolutely used to that north-south trade, Louth as well, Meath, etc. So it depends on the opportunity. It'll be easy because those cross-border customers will know you. And then in terms of that Dublin-Belfast economic corridor, the opportunity is there. But it might be, say, for example, you're a big agri business. It might be that, in fact, the real market opportunity for you is in Cork. Cork is more dairy cows per hectare than anywhere else in Ireland. So say you're in agri, Cork might be an essential market for you. Or there's lots of big foreign direct investment in and around Cork. There's a lot of foreign owned companies, and it might be that in fact the opportunity is there, and it's a pain because it is further away, but that's where the opportunity is. So I think you need to look at, let it be opportunity led. But hopefully for your business, there is opportunity in those closer markets. They do talk about the People's Republic of Cork, and that is harder to break into. So there are little kind of regional distinctions as well. But I think you need to be led where the big opportunity is for your company. If there's opportunity everywhere, then closer to home obviously is easier.
I think that's a very good point, and obviously we'll cover some more detail later on about some of the supports that we can offer just to help you make those initial decisions. Just sort of one other real question at the minute. I think it's probably going back towards the start of the presentation regarding a lot of the stats. Does that mainly apply to product sales? And then linked into this same question is if you're in the service sector and perhaps you're, say, dealing with things like daily rates, is there anything specific you should consider when exporting to Ireland?
Okay. So a lot of the stats, if you look at the different slides, sometimes we talk about trade and goods, and you'll see exports to Ireland being, the lower figure. That's generally when you're just looking at goods, or when it's broken down, the analysis is on goods. So you have to kind of see whether they're talking about goods or goods and services. So goods and services together, overall exports was 6.3 billion, north to south. So yeah, it depends on the specific information. When it comes to services then and things like daily rates, generally speaking, those rates will be higher in the south, but it's not too difficult to kind of start to benchmark. what those are. So that's the kind of research that you want to do to find out what is the kind of standard daily rate. If you know the kind of standard daily rate in the north in your industry, then you want to go and try and find out that equivalent. And it depends who the customer is. The customer may give you that sense, or if you're networking down there, you might get a sense of what those rates are. You want to start to ask questions, because obviously you don't want to under or overprice yourself in the market. But by and large, any services delivered in the south will be a higher, and I don't want to put a kind of percentage on it, because it will vary depending on industry and sector and opportunity and location and everything else. But generally speaking, there is an expectation that those daily rates are a fair bit higher in the south.
Okay, and then we've got a question in. It was an extension of a question asked earlier on about online platforms, and it's asking specifically around tech platforms and asking if you're basically selling on say a SaaS subscription platform, is that considered an export?
It will be counted under services. Yeah, so if you're selling services, I think that the reason why there's some disparity in services is it is harder to quantify. And I would have to have a statistician here to tell me exactly how they come up with the figures. But in theory, if you're trading services, provided it's recorded somewhere, then it'll be included in those kind of overall exporting stats. But that's why a lot of the breakdown of information is typically for goods, because it's a lot easier to account for.
Okay. Thank you very much, Ruth. I think that's all the questions for now. Keep the questions coming, everyone, and we'll endeavour to try and get as many of them answered as we can throughout the webinar.
Yeah, perfect. Okay, so now that we have researched the market, we've identified the target customer, we've identified the needs of that target customer, we've identified the competitors, we've defined our competitive advantage. You actually need to start selling now. What do you need to actually do to sell your product or services in the Irish market? And this really comes down to raising awareness of your offering in the market. So kind of marketing at that broad scale, networking with the right people, making contact with customers and starting to sell, and defining and refining your sales process. So how will you market in Ireland? And what I usually advise here is leverage what has worked in the home market, but don't necessarily assume it's exactly the same. But for example, if your website's been important in terms of helping you win customers in the north, then make sure you're optimizing that website for the southern market. Have Irish case study examples. So we talked earlier on about the objections that your customer in the south might have. So fear of the unknown is a big part of that. So if they if they're looking at you for the first time, they've heard about your company, they want to go on the website and see what you're doing. But when they go on, all the examples are in, Ahadui or Ochnacloy or, Coleraine or Oma, and there's none in the south. It doesn't build that reassurance. They want to see if they're in Dublin, oh, look, they did some business in Carlow or Wexford or Waterford or wherever it is. If you've got, even if it's a small little case study example, try and put that in. If you've done any work at all in the south, make sure you've got some example there on your website. It just helps reduce the fear. And the same in terms of your social media, proactively put on a little case study, some work you've done in the south. Or if you're out and about in Dublin, or you're out and about in that southern market, put that on the social media. If you're attending an event, if you're at a networking event, if you're at a trade show, showcase what you're doing, shout about what you're doing in the Irish market, show that you're actively looking for new business in the market. PR and paid promotion then, what does this need to play a role for you? So if you have, for example, a consumer product, or you're really active in a certain industry, you might need that kind of editorial content in a PR sense. You may need to look at Google Ads, or you may need some, trade press advertising. You might need traditional newspaper advertising. I can't tell you what's going to suit your business, but what would be beneficial in this world. And then trade shows as well. And we've found actually more and more trade shows being really important in terms of how Northern Ireland businesses really start to get a reputation or win business in the Republic of Ireland. And particularly if it's relatively new market, if you're maybe not getting that traction, attending trade shows can work really well. I have some trade shows here, and these are obviously depending on in the industry, but these are trade shows that have worked really well for Northern Ireland businesses in the past. If you are an artisan maker, or you have a craft type business, or you're an artist, etc., showcase at the RDS in January is a kind of essential. This works both ways. Southern businesses selling north do really well because retail buyers from throughout Ireland will be there, and that's from things, Kilkenny shops, from Brown Thomas, from Evoca, from Little Irish Gift Retail, from organisations in the north that have retail shops like the National Trust, like National Museums, all these kind of buyers will be at Showcase, and it's a really good way to get noticed. IFEX in Dublin, if you're in the food sector, you'll have buyers from hospitality and food retailing. If you're in agri or you sell a machinery product, the Ploughing in Carlow every September, enormous show. Again, an opportunity to get out there, to meet people in the market, to get your product noticed. Ideal Home Show in Dublin in April and October. If you're anything related to home, particularly if your buyer is a consumer, gadgets, tech, furniture, furnishings, accessories, joinery, carpentry, whatever it is, an opportunity for you. There are numerous trade shows. It really does depend on the industry, but these can just be an amazing opportunity to really start to build awareness in the market. How else might you market? What makes sense for your business and industry? The specifics here really depend on your own business, but the point is that a strong marketing mix will help you to raise awareness in that market. Pop-up shops or units, attending markets, billboards, podcasts, radio, attending or sponsoring events, CPD events, etc. What might work for you in that market. And it's not just one thing. It's not enough to say, well, I did some social media in the south, it didn't get me anywhere. What's your marketing mix? What's worked in the north? What might work in the south? Or what else might you need to consider when it comes to getting your brand, your product or service known better in the market? And then how will you build your network in Ireland? So if you think about your success in the north, chances are you already know lots of people. You've had referrals, you've had those inbound leads, you kind of go to different events potentially, and you meet people who you already know. But how will you meet and build your network in Ireland? So who do you need to meet? Where will they hang out? It could be networking events, shows, industry specific events, CPD events, all can work. My only caveat, as always, with networking is it's time consuming and you need to be selective. So one of the traps that businesses can sometimes fall into is networking for networking's sake as opposed to selling. So sometimes you don't really feel like lifting the phone. I don't really feel like doing those emails that I need to do. I'll go to another networking event, and that can become a really vicious cycle that you're just networking for networking's sake instead of networking to build sales, to grow your contacts, to transfer these to customers. So do be careful. But in terms of networking event, there are millions and millions of these events. It depends on your sector, what's useful. If you're looking at selling to the public sector, the big ProcureX event in the RDS, InterTradeIreland have these great conferences. Venture Capital Conference in 2024. There was the big cross-border conference in 2023 as well. Network Ireland, a female networking organisation. They do a lot of cross events with women in business. An industry specific one, Engineers Ireland, hugely important for the engineering community. If you have a product or service in engineering, that might be a body that you want to start to engage with. Irish Marketing Conference, Dublin Tech Summit, etc., etc. Do look carefully at the event, do look carefully at who's going to be there, what it's about before you decide to attend. But all of these things can be super useful. I'm not going to go into a huge amount of details in terms of actual selling and sales process, because if you're already selling your product, a lot of this stuff should be, I don't want to teach a granny to suck eggs, if you like. You're probably already doing this, but just some points to emphasize. is the importance of consistency and process. So gone are the days where it's all about a maverick salesperson. Generally speaking, good sales now relies on consistency and good sales process. Create your sales plan, define your sales process, and build in accountability. And it can be as simple as a little structure like this, a timetable. What are you doing week 1, week 2, week 3, week 4? Getting it in the timetable and getting the accountability built in there is so important. Similarly, on your database, making sure, say one person is leading on this, make sure it's down in a defined form. Don't just have notes scrawled on notepads. Have it in some kind of database, even if you don't at this point have a CRM. Have your sources, have your information, have your calls made, etc. Record everything. And then just in terms of your sales plan, so you have your marketing plan, you're thinking about your advertising, you have your overall schedule, manage your online engagement. Don't forget about the sales, traditional sales methods. Make it personable. How are you doing your calls? How are you doing your emails? What's the content of those? Get all of these into the sales plan. Follow up with the engagement, online or traditional. You want to have this kind of balance of contact and genuine value and care. So if you have if you're likely to be too pushy on customers, send them an email every day. When can we meet? When can we meet? When can we meet? They'll switch off or they'll block you. But if you just ignore them, say you get a little bit of a bite and you don't come back to them, they'll move elsewhere. So it's that balance of contact, genuine value and care. Strategic thinking and planning keeps motivation high and the changes possible. And always have this constant cycle of improvement. So you develop your sales plan, say something doesn't quite work in the process. Okay, what improvement could you make? What could you add to your sales plan to make that better? So constantly improving. Okay, and then we're going to just talk briefly about selling to the Irish public sector. So depending on what you sell, you may wish to look at opportunities in the public sector market in Ireland. So public procurement in Ireland was worth in excess of 22 billion in 2023. So there's a huge amount of goods and services that are bought by government and government organisations each year. The Office of Government Procurement manages public procurement in the Republic of Ireland, and it has 250 staff across 5 locations. Its role is to help the Irish government save money when purchasing goods and services for the public sector, and it has 4 sector sourcing partners in health, education, local government and defence. All of the opportunities above threshold value are displayed on the eTenders procurement website. That's the main platform for displaying all Irish public sector procurement opportunities, etenders.gov.ie for anybody that wants to look it up. What are they actually buying then? There's 16 categories in total, 8 common areas managed by the Office of Government Procurement: ICT, facilities management, fleet and plant, marketing, print and stationery, travel, professional services, utilities, HR and managed services, and spot buying. So those are the kind of 8 common categories. And then you've got your specific areas that have specialist type of procurement, and that is government procurement, health, defence, education, and local government. So, for example, medical equipment, pharma supplies, lab equipment, plant hire, defence equipment, etc. What are they actually buying? The main thing, as you can see up the top there, and again, apologies for the small graphic. The highest value items bought, and you can see there the figures from 2017, 2018 and 2019. So this is obviously a little bit out of date. Medical, surgical and pharmaceutical supplies up the top there. Professional services, facilities management and maintenance, building works and civils, ICT and office equipment, medical and diagnostic equipment. We have huge value in all of those areas. And then you can see the other categories as well. So if you sell something that falls into those categories, you may wish to look at selling to the Irish public sector. If you're interested in tendering at the cross-border level, then check out Go to Tender, another Intertrade Ireland programme, and really start to understand the opportunities for you in that public sector market. In terms of the thresholds then, they're a little bit different to the north if you're familiar with Northern Irish procurement thresholds. Up to €50,000 for goods and services is just a request for quote. The equivalent figure is £30,000 in the north. So it's higher. The threshold for request for quote, up to 200,000 for works. So at that level, they don't have to be advertised on eTenders, not compulsory, and they may do so, but they don't have to. On eTenders, then anything over 50,000 will be on there, and over 50,000 for works. And then the official journal of the European Union, these are for much bigger contracts. These have to be open to, all businesses in the EU. And that's over 140k for supplies and services and over 5.4 million for works. In terms of SMEs in public procurement, 92% of what public bodies spend is spent with firms in Ireland. So the vast, vast majority goes to firms on the island. 55% of this is with SMEs, and the government is specifically trying to assist SMEs in public procurement, and that's in line with European Commission's Code of Best Practice. How they're doing that is, for example, increasing the threshold level of a request for quote up to 50k, and that's to reduce the burden of completing ITTs. So a request for quote involves a lot less information. An invitation to tender is a much more comprehensive document, takes a lot longer. So they're trying to help SMEs by reducing the number of contracts that require this much more comprehensive invitation to tender. And there are specific measures as well that public bodies should take to promote SME participation. So I guess what we're saying here is, look, the Irish government wants SMEs and micro enterprises to sell to it. They're doing various things to try to start to make that easier. And there are huge opportunities in a whole lot of these sectors, 22 billion a year being bought. It may be that this is something you want to look at for your business as well. And if you do, check out Go to Tender. Okay, and finally then, retaining customers in Ireland. So, if you're going to go to the effort of winning new customers in the market, how are you going to retain them? It's just a couple of things to point out. So quality and price, will always be, or have always been, and will continue to be the highest factors in, deciding to purchase. But when it comes to retaining the customer, there is so much more emphasis now on ease and convenience, on service and personal care, on trust and recognition, on product origin, and on health and safety. An enormous study by Accenture, huge big global consulting firm, have found this increase in emphasis on all of these things. Some of these things wouldn't have even been considered necessarily, or not overtly considered in years gone by. It was all about quality and price. But now people really do care about ease, convenience, service and personal care, trust, recognition, product origin, health and safety. And if you look at the marketing of big successful global brands, you will see that emphasis, how they're doing that. Think about the convenience of something like Amazon. Think about the focus of, sustainability focused organizations talking about product origin. Think about the level of service and personal care that is offered by some companies out there now. These things more and more important, and they're going to help you to retain customers in the market. In terms of what the process is, you've got your kind of reach where you're identifying what your client wants, connecting with potential customers, you're acquiring your client. If you can find that win-win solution, you're developing a contract and you're signing a contract. And at that point, effectively, you've made your sale. And that's what we've really been talking about up to this point. Finding a client that wants to buy what you want to sell, finding a win-win solution and getting the sale. But in order to retain that customer, you've got to do these last two things. So it doesn't end at the sale. You need to retain that customer. So check in to see if everything is working properly. Stay in touch about new products. Continue to check in. And then nurture. Provide the customer with desirable incentives and continue to evaluate customer satisfaction. So how are you going to retain and nurture your customers in the Irish market? It's a practical things to think about. How are you going to check in with your customer? If you win a new customer in Dublin or in Cork, are you going to plan in-person visits? Are you going to be on the phone? Are you going to send them newsletters by email or post? Are you going to do a kind of mail drop of offers every so often? Are you going to engage with them across your social media channels? Will you have a members area? Will you have a loyalty scheme? Will you have exclusive events? What is it that's going to help you to check in with your customers and really manage that account effectively? Think as well about the processes and tools that you will use to track your customer relationships. So it can be as simple as a calendar and an Excel sheets, or you might use some CRM software. That these kind of things can really help you manage the business as you go. It depends how many customers you have, and it depends how complicated your business is. I'm not really going to go into the details of this, but there's some of the stuff that you can do on a CRM. If you're in the north as well, we do have workshops through the Go Succeed program as well, and you can attend workshops on these kinds of things. So keep an eye out for those as well. But a CRM will provide a database. It'll allow you to track customer interactions, your sales pipeline management. It'll allow you to set up automated task and workflow management. You can manage your marketing campaigns. You can manage your customer service. You'll get reporting and analytics. It's not essential if you've got a small and simple business. You don't have to do this, but as you grow and as you really want to retain and manage your customers, it's a brilliant way to do so. Some of the ones that you can use are there, HubSpot, Monday.com, MailChimp, etc. Lots of good options. Okay, so I'm going to pass over now to Marcus. I don't know, Marcus, if there's been any other questions in the meantime, or if anybody wants to put questions in the chat while Marcus is talking, do feel free. But pass on to Marcus around some of the InterTrade Ireland trade hub supports that are available for you if you want to look at expanding your reach into the Irish market.
Okay, thank you very much, Ruth. I'm just going to chat to you now briefly just around some of the support that we can offer to help with some of the issues that we discussed in today's webinar. I should say as well, again, if any of you have any further questions, please do put them in the chat now, and we will try to our best to ask as many of them as possible by the conclusion of the webinar. But so at InterTrade Ireland here, we have a number of very easy to use supports available, designed to try and take a lot of the pressure off you and your business when you're trading cross-border. The first of these I just want to mention to you is the Trade Hub. This is so if you have queries relating to areas such as customs, VAT, or you're engaging in cross-border employment, or you have specific regulations you need advice on, we offer basically fully funded support. This can be in the format of sort of online, easy to understand content, but also fully funded consultancy support, both a quick phone call with one of our improved consultants, which you often can happen within 2 working days, and also more in-depth sort of one-to-one consultancy where perhaps a consultant will spend up to 3 days with you one-on-one, helping you navigate any sort of specific trading issues that you're having. Again, this is a very popular service. We will send out links to help you access the service after the webinar. But if you have any queries relating to customs, VAT, regulation, or employment, I'd strongly recommend you consider availing of the Trade Hub. Can I get the next slide there, please, Ruth?
Yeah.
So some of these workshops, these programs here, will be very relevant based on a lot of the content today. So Ruth mentioned a couple of times the trade export pathway. So basically, if you're looking to sell cross-border for the first time, or you've maybe a very limited experience of selling cross-border, you can avail of the trade export pathway. This is again fully funded one-to-one consultancy, so no cost to yourself. Basically, we offer sort of advice, whether it's market research, whether it's helping you develop a marketing plan, sales export plan, whether it's lead generation, really some of the real practical steps to help you sort of research, prepare, and implement your sales cross border. What we find is that leads on naturally quite well to the next program, Acumen. So you can get funding towards a sales professional, either a part-time or full-time sales professional designed to target the cross-border marketplace. So again, this can be such a valuable resource that gives you the option of bringing somebody in who can work solely on the cross-border market and really help drive new business in that marketplace. Obviously, Ruth mentioned quite recently around selling to the Irish government. We offer support if you're interested in selling to a government body. This is through our Go to Tender program. So when it comes to tendering, it is critical that you know how to tender successfully well in advance of a tender becoming available. And if you know how to tender effectively, the chances of you being successful and securing public contracts are increased, and both here locally in Northern Ireland and also in Ireland. So the Go to Tender program offers businesses basically access to exclusive workshops and also one-to-one mentoring support. It is a very popular program and often sells out months in advance. So I would strongly encourage you, if you think there's any chance in the next couple of years that you would be looking to avail of a bid for public contracts, to consider availing of the Go to Tender program now. Can I get the next slide there, please, Ruth?
Yep.
Yep. So I just touched briefly, this is a new program we run, supply chain and sourcing service. So particularly if you're in the manufacturing sector or engineering sectors and you're looking, you're having some challenges sourcing suppliers, or you're looking to find new suppliers, maybe important from further afield, and you want to see if there's a local option within Ireland, we have a new program dedicated to that. If anyone has any questions around sort of supply chain, please let me know and I will ensure that we can answer them for you. Okay, can I get the next slide, please? Yep. So I just want to make you aware of some of our upcoming webinars. So obviously today was this Guide to Selling in Ireland. On the 19th of November, that is our next webinar. We are doing a webinar on cross-border employment. So if you are a business and you have staff who work cross-border, either part or all the time, if you use subcontractors who work cross-border, if you have staff who are hybrid working across the border, or if you are an employee and you are hybrid working or potentially crossing the border for your job, I would strongly recommend that you join us on the 19th of November to make sure you're aware of all your obligations as either a business employing cross-border workers or as a cross-border employee. We will also be announcing shortly in the next couple of days details of another webinar that takes place at the start of December. There'll be a customs focused webinar. We will share those details once available as well. So I just want to, obviously, there's contact details there as well if you want to get in touch with any of the team. I just, again, as well, first of all, again, invite any questions you may have into the chat. I'd also take this opportunity to thank Ruth for her excellent presentation this morning. And I'm sure you all agree it's been an incredibly valuable presentation. I will also, as well as sharing the slides and recording after this webinar, I will be sending a short feedback survey just to try and get your thoughts on what topics we can add for our 2025 webinar series.